Okay, maybe we'll see. Maybe we'll do that. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. The last couple of times we've been talking about Shabbos and Yontiv davening, Shabbos and Yontiv regular Shemona Esrei Musaf on Shabbos and Yontiv. So I think we're just going to continue right where Rabbi Wohlgemuth continues, and we're in the middle of chapter 9, and it will be the section on Kabbalah Shabbos, Friday night davening. So in mine, it's page 175. Again, it's chapter 9, and it's sort of the third section within chapter 9. And hopefully everyone has it. If you don't have it, please let us know. We'll figure out the right page for your edition. Okay, so on mine it's page 175. And again, chapter 9, the section that's entitled Kabbalah Shabbos, Welcoming the Sabbath. So I'm going to start on the third paragraph of that section. Kabbalah Shabbos, right? Or if you pronounce it Kabbalah Shabbat, is actually a halachic term. It defines the way we take upon ourselves the sanctity of Shabbos. For instance, once the woman of the house kindles the Sabbath candles, so then she has accepted Shabbos, she is forbidden to do any more work. In other words, we'll see what we refer to as Kabbalah Shabbos L'Chadodi is 500 years or so, which is a relatively recent addition to our Siddur. But even before we had our special Friday night davening, you would find the term Kabbalah Shabbos or Kabbalah Shabbat in rabbinic literature. But in that case, it was used as referring to any time someone accepts Shabbos, whenever that is, whether it's someone lighting candles or at any other way or time. Person, there is a mitzvah of Tosefes Shabbos to, whether you like it or not, once the sun sets, it's Shabbos. You can't control that. And there's a mitzvah to accept Shabbos some amount earlier, in theory, a minute earlier, 30 seconds earlier, so that, you're accepting Shabbos by your own choice and adding a little bit to Shabbos. So there's a custom, the custom became for people to light candles 18 minutes before, but there is a mitzvah to accept Shabbos at least a little bit earlier than absolutely necessary. And that would be referred to as Kabbalah Shabbos, accepting Shabbos. So that is one meaning of the term. I'm continuing with Rabbi Wohlgemuth. In our case, however, Kabbalah Shabbos is a liturgical term, meaning it also refers to everything we say Friday night in Shul. It connotes the psalms, songs, and learning sessions that precede Ma'ariv, that we say before Baruch Hu. Okay, so we're all familiar with Kabbalah Shabbos in general, right? Lechadodi, etc. How did this come about? So he's going to give us a little bit of history. By the end of the 15th century, the edict of King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella of Spain put an end to the largest and most influential Jewish community in the world. Suddenly, thousands of Jews became homeless. The expulsion of the Jews from Spain was a traumatic experience of catastrophic proportions. Nobody will ever know how many Jews perished in this tragedy, and many of the refugees settled in the Mediterranean countries. A number of Jews settled in Palestine, the land of Israel, which was part of the Ottoman Empire at that time. This is the one just grab, taking control of the host. Okay. The most influential community in Palestine at that time, so we're talking about then into the 16th century, in the 1500s, the most important city at that time was Tzfat. There was a community in Yerushalayim, but Tzfat was even the larger and more important community. In the 16th century, Tzfat had attracted an accumulation of the greatest scholars of that age. Ordinary Jews who were engaged in the textile industry made it possible for the scholars to pursue their studies. The people of Tzfat, lay people and scholars alike, frantically wanted to bring about the Messianic age so that Jews would never again have the tragic experience of persecution and homelessness. Right. At that time, again, there was this Messianic, mystic yearning and desire and trying to make Mashiach come. Some of it, again, because of the trauma of the expulsion from Spain. And so he says, toward that end, the people of Tzfat engaged in three major activities. Now, we're not going to go through all of this because some of this really doesn't have to do with davening at all. He says the first was halacha. Okay, I'm not 100% sure how that would hasten the coming of Mashiach, other than just in general, Jews fulfilling the mitzvos. But okay, that was one major kind of endeavor of the Jews at the time, and the greatest halachicist in Tzfat at the time was Rabbi Yosef Karo, the author of the Shulchan Aruch. He says the second way was they tried to reestablish the Sanhedrin, another fascinating story. They tried to bring back the Sanhedrin. And then I'm at the bottom of my page, 176. The third activity in which the people of Tzfat engaged was mysticism or Kabbalah. And the greatest Kabbalists of that age were the Ari. Okay, the Arizal. And his student, Rav Chaim Vital, who popularized the teachings of the Ari. The Kabbalists believe that the performance of commandments has cosmic significance, etc. Okay. Shabbat is called, off to the next paragraph, Shabbat is called Me'ein Olam Haba. So we've spoken about this in different contexts. Shabbos is supposed to be, a taste of the world to come. And the people of Tzfat were eagerly awaiting the coming of the Messiah. On Friday, they engaged in feverish activities to welcome the Sabbath. Perhaps it was their hope that a miniature Messianic age would develop into the true Messianic age, and their welcoming of the Sabbath would be the beginning of the redemption. So just to elaborate on this a little bit. The point is that for the people who created Kabbalah Shabbos, right, it wasn't just about accepting Shabbos or quote unquote greeting the Shabbos queen, right? The incoming Shabbos was, sanctity coming into the world. It was Hashem's presence. It was Shabbos is Me'ein Olam Haba, so it's, a taste of the Mashiach, of the world to come, etc. So for them, it was, and to some degree, they're obviously right. They just accentuated it more than maybe we feel it. The waiting for Shabbos and the bringing in for Shabbos, it wasn't just about Shabbos. It was about, again, Olam Haba, the perfection of the world, their greatest yearning for Hashem and for sanctity, etc. That's what it was about. And so they created this incredible liturgy, tefillah, for accepting Shabbos. Now, they did not create it out of whole cloth. It had very strong foundations going back all the way to the Gemara. What is the basis of Kabbalah Shabbos in the Gemara? I'm continuing Rabbi Wohlgemuth. Okay, very good question, Linda. Let's read a little bit more, and we'll definitely, if I don't bring it back up, remind me in a little bit,
Okay.
Linda. The Talmud tells us that Rabbi Hanina dressed up and said, "Let us go and greet the Sabbath queen." And Rav Yonai would say, "Come, O bride, come, O bride." Right? How do you say that in Hebrew? Boi kala, boi kala.
Yeah.
Right? The people of Tzfat, so already in the days of the Gemara, there were certain sages that at least their practice is that they would go out and they would at least have a line or two that they would say as they were sort of greeting the Shabbos queen. The people of Tzfat developed these short greetings into a lengthy ceremony. In their good Sabbath clothes, they would trek to the outskirts of the city. That's also based in the Gemara. Everyone doesn't quote the Gemara, but the Gemara says these sages, they would wrap themselves in their talus and they would go out and sit and wait for the Shabbos to come. So they would go out, sing psalms and songs in honor of the Sabbath queen. And these ceremonies developed in Tzfat, but soon became part of the Friday night service throughout the Jewish world. So the refrain of Lechadodi Luis is going to say I should pull this up on the screen. We'll see, maybe I will. But the refrain, right? Lechadodi lekraskala pnei Shabbos and Kabbalah. That's more or less based on this line in the Gemara. More or less, based on what the Gemara already records that certain sages would do. I don't recall if this is in Rabbi Wohlgemuth anywhere, but this poem, right? Lechadodi is a poem, and I say this half seriously, half joking. I don't know originally in Tzfat if they sang it with like tunes, the way we sing it, or they just would kind of recite it like poetry, or just with some kind of sing song. But many write that. So the author of our Lechadodi is someone named Rav Shlomo Alkabetz. Right, if you're not aware, that's why. What does everyone want? Does everyone prefer to look in their siddur, or for me to quickly find it on Sfaria and pull the words up on the screen? What do people? Is everyone okay looking in their siddur?
Yeah, fine.
Okay. So if you do have Lechadodi in front of you, so after just the opening refrain of Lechadodi, so the first paragraph is Shamor v'Zachor. So the first letter of each stanza spells out Shlomo Halevi. Which is for the author, Rav Shlomo Alkabetz. Shlomo Alkabetz also wrote, now I'm getting confused, did he write the Alshech? I think he wrote the commentary, the Alshech. And so he was one of these great sages. There are many great sages just kind of walking the streets of Tzfat at this time. You had Rav Yosef Cairo, you had Shlomo Alkabetz, the Arizal, Rav Chaim Vital. But it seems that there were many, or certainly multiple versions of Lechadodi, meaning there were many people that are writing these, again, because you have to imagine before it was set, right? This is sort of developing. It's not like a set thing that everyone does exactly the same thing. It could be originally they said different Tehillim before Lechadodi, different than we do. And so there was a Lechadodi kind of kind of like model, and maybe everyone would have a very similar refrain of Lechadodi, but then different people wrote different stanzas to put in, and this was one of them. And so this one is the one that became accepted. It was written by Rav Shlomo Alkabetz, so he himself was this great scholar, and it kind of got the stamp of approval of the Arizal, right, who is the greatest Kabbalist that everyone looked up to in Tzfat. So the Arizal said, Rav Shlomo Alkabetz's Lechadodi, that's the best one. And so that became, the one that was accepted, and eventually became sort of standard for the entire Jewish people. What is Lechadodi about? So the refrain, right? Lechadodi, come my bride, the Shabbos queen, let us go accept the Shabbos. So that's about Shabbos. The first two stanzas are about Shabbos, right? Shamor v'Zachor b'dibor echad. Hashem spoke, right? Zachor d'yom Shabbat, v'Shamor d'yom Shabbat, right? In one utterance, right? The two versions of the mitzvah of Shabbos. The second stanza, Likra Shabbos l'chu v'nelcha. Let us go greet Shabbos, for it is the source of all blessing. But then after the first two stanzas, I'm not sure if you've noticed this before, it stops talking about Shabbos. There is nothing left, nothing else that is about Shabbos. Maybe the last stanza is about Shabbos, but the rest are not about Shabbos. right? They're about that the Jewish people should get up and get dressed in their beautiful clothing for Mashiach. They're about Yerushalayim, that Yerushalayim should wake up, that Yerushalayim should shake off her dust. But they're basically about the Mashiach and the perfection of the world and redemption. Because again, for them, it really wasn't just about Shabbos, right? It's about what Shabbos represented, which is much more, which is about, again, Olam Haba and redemption coming to the world. Okay. Any comments, questions, thoughts?
Can I tell a Lachadodi joke?
Please, Louise.
Okay. So what would you do on Friday afternoon if you all of a sudden realize that you haven't got any challah in the house?
I don't know.
Turn to the door and you say, Boi challah, Boi challah.
Okay.
And then when the challah comes in, what do you say? Shalom Halechem. I'll mute now.
Okay. Thank you, Louise. That reminds you of something else to read, though. Let's read the very next paragraph of in Rabbi Wohlgemuth, once you mentioned about opening the door, etc. Rabbi Wohlgemuth writes, during the Himla Chadodi, the whole congregation turns around, at least for the last stanza, symbolizing their march toward the Sabbath Queen, who is considered to come from the west, which is the back of the shul. Now there actually are different customs. Most people, I believe, in any shul, they always just turn around, face the back of the shul. What's the idea to face the back of the shul? Well, the front of the shul is to the east, the back of the shul is to the west. So the sun is setting to the west. So we imagine, so to speak, that Shabbos is coming from the west. Even though I think really Shabbos comes over the world from the east, if you think about it, right? Because it becomes Shabbos earlier in the East Coast and the West Coast. But anyways, we imagine the Shabbos Queen is coming from the west since the sun is setting in the west. So we're turning to the west to welcome the Shabbos Queen. At least in print, I've seen others say that no, you're not supposed to face the west. You're supposed to face the door of the shul, which in many times is in the back of the shul, like in the Young Israel Brookline, but not necessarily. It could be on the side, so you should face the door. Why face the door? Either because, again, we're imagining the Shabbos Queen is coming in through the door, or no, we're trying to somewhat symbolize what they used to originally do. Was what would they do? They would go march outside, right? That's what the Gemara says. That's what they would do in Sfat. They would go out into the fields. So we don't actually go out into the fields, but we kind of turn towards the door as if we're beginning our march out to the fields. Right? Wohlgemuth says some people actually walk a few steps toward the Sabbath Queen. I believe anyone here can correct me. I think Rav Soloveitchik would walk from the front of the shul all the way back to where the door was and would like actually open up the door and bow or something like that. Is that right, Kenny? So he would, and so what would he do? He would walk across the whole shul and everyone would stand where they were watching him?
Yeah, they all turned around, they're facing the back, and he would just walk when they said to the rack past the Rima to where the door. Well, the door was open; it wasn't really closed there. So, in the old show, at least.
Mm-hmm. But I'm saying no one else would walk. He would be the only one walking.
He'd be the only one usually, from what I remember.
So some people, Rav Soloveitchik, he would walk, down the whole aisle of the shul.
I do today see a lot of, nowadays, now that we're outside, I see people turning towards the entrance to the courtyard rather than the back of the shul, the back of the shul is east, but the entrance to the courtyard is, the back of the shul is west, I'm sorry, rather than the courtyard, which is whatever.
It's north, right?
Side. Yeah. It's on the side because we're outside.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah.
People are turning towards that entrance for Boi Challah, Boi Challah.
Interesting. Yes, Linda. Linda, unmute.
So in Israel, like here, we daven towards the east because that's where Yerushalayim is. But in Israel, you daven in whatever direction Yerushalayim is. So if you're in Sfat, Yerushalayim is south.
Yep,
So
you're right. So I just, it's just an interesting question. I don't know if anyone knows, what do most shuls do, in Israel that are either to the
I
north or
never
to
go
the
on
south?
Friday night there.
Do they face the back of the shul? So
I
that's
don't
the
know.
question, Linda, to find out. Do they face the back of the shul, or do they face west? Or do they face the door? All three are possibilities.
I can ask people.
Yeah, if you find out, that'd be interesting.
Let me text my sister while we're talking. She lives south of Jerusalem.
Okay, very interesting. Okay, so this is a little bit what Lechadodi is about. Linda just asked in the chat. The custom is that if someone their first Shabbos, during Shiva, they stay out during Kabbalah Shabbos and then they come back in after Lechadodi. So the reason why they do that is just Lechadodi is a joyous is a joyous part of the tefillah. So the minhag was that they stay out for that. Now, in addition, right, so the minhag is we say hamakom yanachem to them when they come in, and then if they're changing their seats, they sit down their new seat. Now, the reason why we do that is, okay, so we want to express our words of consolation as a community to the person, but we do it before Mizmor Shir L'Yom HaShabbos. So we have, there are 6 prakim of Tehillim before Lechadodi. We're going to come back to those 6, but those more or less represent the 6 days of the week. If there's 6 prakim of Tehillim before Lechadodi, those are the 6 days of the week. Rabbi Wohlgemuth has this. Then we have Lechadodi, the song of Lechadodi, which is accepting Shabbos, and then Mizmor Shir L'Yom HaShabbos. Now, Mizmor Shir L'Yom HaShabbos, that was an older minhag before people had this whole Lechadodi thing. Already from the days of the Rambam, there were some that added Mizmor Shir L'Yom HaShabbos as part of Shabbos Mariv. So, for example, in the Shulchan Aruch, which was written by Rav Yosef Karo, who's a contemporary to when all this is coming together, the way it's presented in the Shulchan Aruch does not discuss, Rav Yosef Karo does not discuss Lechadodi. But he does mention, you say Mizmor Shir L'Yom HaShabbos. And he says, once you say Mizmor Shir L'Yom HaShabbos, you have accepted Shabbos. And for that reason, we say Hamakom Yanachem before that. Why? Strictly speaking, the basic halacha is you're allowed to say Hamakom Yanachem or other words of consolation to someone on Shabbos, even though we don't have persons not supposed to engage in displays of mourning on Shabbos. But for me to say to someone, I'm so sorry to hear about your loss, that person is not doing an act of mourning. I'm offering consolation to the person. But nevertheless, the custom is that in most places we don't do that. We don't say Hamakom Yanachem on Shabbos, even though it's not technically forbidden, but it's kind of smacks too much of mourning and displays of mourning. So we say Hamakom Yanachem. So the custom was you should say Hamakom Yanachem before Mizmor Shir L'Yom HaShabbos, because once you say Mizmor Shir L'Yom HaShabbos, you've accepted Shabbos. You shouldn't really say Hamakom Yanachem. Now it's a little bit of a problem because generally it's assumed that nowadays, unless you have intention otherwise, that we accept Shabbos with the last stanza of Kabbalah Shabbos, of Lechadodi. Okay, Linda, we'll come back in just a second. Most assume, right, when we bow at the end of Lechadodi, you're accepting Shabbos. Again, unless you specifically have in mind not to. So then it's a little bit of a problem that we say Hamakom Yanachem after that, but really technically, again, you're allowed to say Hamakom Yanachem. But in general, so we have the 6 prakim of Tehillim, the 6 days of the week, Lechadodi, and then Mizmor Shir L'Yom HaShabbos. Linda, what did you find out for us?
No, that's Louise was finding out. I was also just thinking about doors, like the whole
Yeah.
thing with facing the door to greet the
Yeah.
Kala, and then opening the door for Eliyahu. Is this all like messianic stuff?
I don't know. It's a very I've never thought about that connection before you're asking now. And it's a very interesting connection, but I'm not sure.
It
I'd have to
seems
think
these
about it
are
more.
like these are all like Mashiach related things,
You
right?
you are right. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Rabbi,
Yes. Oh, yes, Mark, please. Oh, I'm
just
sorry. I didn't see your hand, Mark. I'm
sorry.
sorry.
You just comment. So I'm off on another shul. I'll be bowing in the wrong direction sometimes while they're bowing in another one. I have to. I guess I'm supposed to quickly adapt to what the shul's minhag is. And then also when you turn around, I like to keep facing the opposite direction through the whole verse and the refrain. Other people will turn around beforehand, and then I'm ending up singing facing people or even bowing to people that are facing me. So that's it. I want to hear your comments on that.
Yeah, okay, interesting question. So you do see, different people, both getting up and turning around to face, let's say if you're facing the back of the shul. Both when exactly you get up, when you turn around, when you bow and turn back. You do see different people doing it at slightly different times. I don't think there's a right or wrong way to do it. If there's a certain amount of variation amongst different people in the shul doing it slightly different times, to me, I think that's okay. If it's sort of very demonstrative, you're doing something in a way that's very demonstratively different, so then I would just more adapt to what most people are doing around you. But that's a little subjective, but that's what I would say about that. Yes, okay. Let's keep going in Rabbi Wohlgemuth. Kabbalah Shabbos service contains the following sections: Psalms 95 through 99, Psalm 29, the hymn Lechadodi, Psalms 92 and 93, and then Bameh Madlikin. So let's look at, in the Siddur, we have these 6 prakim of Tehillim before Lechadodi, which many say is, parallels the 6 days of the week. Rabbi Wohlgemuth will say that somewhere. And the 6 prakim that we say, so the first 5 are just 5 prakim of Tehillim right in a row. And then we have Perek Chavtet right before Lechadodi.
If those are supposed to be the 6 days of the week, then why aren't we saying the Shir Shel Yom for the other days?
Okay, excellent question. Okay. So that sort of gets to the question, what I was about to say, right? Why do we have these 6? So, okay, the 6 parallel 6 days of the week, but why specifically these 6? Okay, excellent. So let's go a little bit further, right? Psalms 95 through 99 form a unit within the book of Psalms, which describes the redemption of the Messianic era with no relapse into servitude. So what are the first 5 about, 95 through 99? They're kind of general prakim of Tehillim. They speak in very general terms, but they're basically about, right? Wohlgemuth says, the Messianic era. You could read as Messianic era, or certainly they're just basically about how Hashem is awesome, amazing, King of the world. All nations recognize him. We are his people. They're prakim that are certainly not prakim that are, petitions or in times of distress. They're basically about, that Hashem is King of the world and the whole world sees it and knows it. When I was looking at them in preparation, I also thought maybe the reason why these were chosen, and again, it fits into the whole idea of the Kabbalah Shabbos is not just about accepting Shabbos, it's about Me'in Olam Haba, It's about yearning for Mashiach. I also thought maybe when you look at them, so within these five, and actually several places, it speaks about one, like let us go out to Hashem. So for example, just the first one, Lechu niranana laHashem, come, right, like lech, come and let us sing for Hashem. Or just 3 or 4 verses into it, Bo nishtachave v'nichra, come and let us go bow to Hashem. So there's language of sort of let us come, which is reminiscent of Lechadodi, what that Gemara that was based off of, which was Lecha, right? Let us go and greet the Shabbos queen. Let us go greet Hashem. And also in several places, right? There's that line that repeats in a couple of the prakim, right? Lifnei Hashem kiba lishvo ta'aretz, right? I'm sure that sounds familiar to everyone, right? It appears in 2 of the prakim, right? For Hashem is coming. Now it says he's coming to judge or to rule over the world, but it's a positive thing, right? It says, let us all rejoice, for Hashem is coming. So that also fits very well with sort of the mood, the experience. The Shabbos queen is coming, Shabbos is coming, Hashem is coming. So again, these 5 prakim are very apropos in the sense of, again, it's this feeling of, they're extremely positive, uplifting prakim, but Hashem is king, and we're all his, his people, and the world belongs to him. But there's also this language of, let us go greet him, for he is coming to us. So maybe that's another reason why they were chosen. And then then we have the 6th chapter, the 6th parak of Tehillim of Kabbalah Shabbos, which is Tehillim Chavtet 29. Now, let us. I'm skipping 1 page in my Rabbi Wohlgemuth to the paragraph that begins the 6th Psalm, Psalm 29. 1 second. So, Louise, do you guys say anything? Okay, so in Efrat they turn to the west. Yeah, okay. I'm not surprised that okay. Okay, so continuing with the paragraph in Rabbi Wohlgemuth, the 6th Psalm. The 6th Psalm, Psalm 29, is usually recited while standing, right? Most people, that's the common practice. You get up for these 6 Psalms. So why? So first of all, what is it about? Let's actually, before we read Rabbi Wohlgemuth, let's look at that parak of Tehillim. So the first 2 sentences, the first 2 verses are basically just, come, let us give honor, praise to Hashem. Now, if you've never thought about this, or have never done this exercise, it's very interesting. So this is the paragraph, the parak, that's all the Kol Hashem, the voice of God. So what does it say? Kol Hashem al Hamayim, Kel HaKavod Hirim, Hashem al Mayim Rabim. The voice of God, the Lord's voice. I'll read Rabbi Sachs for you. The Lord's voice echoes over the waters. The God of glory thunders. The Lord is over the mighty waters. Kol Hashem HaKoach, Kol Hashem HaAdar. The Lord's voice is in power. The Lord's voice is in beauty. Kol Hashem Shover Arazim. The Lord's voice breaks the cedars of the Lebanon. Kol Hashem Chosef Lavosesh. The Lord's voice cleaves flames of fire. Does anyone, if you knew this before I even said anything, so maybe don't answer, but what does this mean, the Lord's voice, or what is this describing? The Lord's voice makes the desert quake. The Lord shakes the deserts of Kadesh.
Sounds like Matan Torah.
Sinai.
Okay, very good. That's an excellent answer. Okay, but it can't just be our scene. What does it mean? It's breaking the cedars of Lebanon. It's not. And what does it mean? It's out on the water. Kol Hashem al Hamayim. So, many commentaries explain the simple meaning of this paragraph, of this parak, is that it is describing this incredible thunderstorm and coming out from over the sea and then coming over land, and literally the thunder and lightning, striking trees and burning down trees and making animals run and jump, which the parak describes. But the David HaMelech, when he saw this, he didn't just he wasn't a meteorologist. He saw, the voice of God, the power of God, God's might, and this just being, a drop of it. But that's what, how it inspired him. Which is, I don't know, it's very interesting just to understand that on that level. But I'm so happy that Louise and Mark both said Matan Torah. So that's how the Medrash learns it. The Medrash says this is describing Har Sinai, and both could be true, meaning the kind of the amount in the most thunderous, thunder lightning storm that you can imagine, right? And the power that you feel in that, but also kind of the beauty of it. So that was like an echo of what Har Sinai was like, right? So both readings are you can understand both to be true. Okay, excellent. So now let's see what Rabbi Wohlgemuth says. So Psalm 29 is usually recited while standing. The psalm describes a violent storm starting on the ocean and making its way to the mountains of Lebanon, and from there it turns south, spreading fear and destruction. We stand in awe of God's great power and control over nature. The commentaries, however, see in this psalm a symbol of the giving of the Torah. The Medrash says that. Indeed, the revelation on Mount Sinai took place amid thunder and lightning. So this is sort of describing Matan Torah, which means revelation, Hashem appearing in the world. The psalm was chosen for Kabbalah Shabbos since the Torah was given on Shabbos, and the psalm reenacts the revelation on Mount Sinai. Thus, we stand in reverence of the Almighty. Now, it's not only because the Torah is given on Shabbos, but again, this is what the coming of Shabbos is the coming of Hashem, the revelation of Hashem in the world. Since this parak, so to speak, is supposed to describe Hashem appearing, so we stand for it. We stand for it. Now, in addition, the Gemara says one of the reasons why there are 18 brachos in a regular Shemona Esrei is because Hashem's name, Yud He Vav He, appears 18 times in this parak. You can quickly count if you want. I think I've checked it before. I don't recall. But that's what the Gemara says. It says Yud He Vav He 18 times. And the Gemara says, and on Shabbos, we have 7 brachos. Why do we have 7 brachos in our Amidah on Shabbos? Because the word kol appears 7 times in this paragraph. Yes, I just checked that. Kol appears 7 times. So, and there's a connection between all of that, because the point is, if this parak, Shemona Esrei is standing before Hashem. So if this parak is a description of, the Hashem's appearance in the world, so that could be used as a model for Shemona Esrei. So for all these reasons, there's sort of special significance to this parak, and the minhag developed that we stand for it. Okay. Any questions, thoughts, comments? Okay, then we will continue with Rabbi Wohlgemuth. These 6 psalms are followed by Lechadodi, then Psalms 92 and 93, and then there's a Kaddish. And then we say Bameh Madlikin. which is a Talmudic excerpt. It's the second chapter of Masechet Shabbos that fulfills our obligation to study halacha. So we sort of study something, study the chapter which is about Shabbos candles, what you can use for Shabbos candles. We then include a paragraph about Torah scholars bringing peace into the world. And thus we fulfill the obligation of studying Agadah. And then there's a Kaddish D'Rabbanan. Now, if you look in the bottom on the footnote 46, so why do we say B'meh Balikim? Why do we suddenly read a chapter of Mishnah? So some say the more classical answer is we want to delay a little bit. We want to give everyone time to make sure they've gotten off from work and gotten ready from at home, and then they can make it to shul before Marv actually begins. That is the classical answer. Footnote 46, he says, academic scholars such as Naftali Weider, I don't know who that is, surmise that the practice of reciting this chapter of the Mishnah every Friday night was instituted by the Gaonim as an anti-Karaite polemic to overcome the claim by the Karaites that a Jew may not have a light burning in his house on Shabbos. This was one of the classical arguments between sort of rabbinic Judaism and the Karaites, that the pasuk says lo sevaroish b'chom lo shvosechem. We translate that as you cannot light a fire on Shabbos. If it's burning beforehand, it can continue to burn on Shabbos. You just can't light a fire on Shabbos. But the Karaites read it as no, you cannot have a fire burning on Shabbos. So that's why actually Shabbos candles themselves, when we light Shabbos candles, at a certain time, that was a statement that sort of you believed in what we call sort of traditional Judaism, a leniency, so to speak. The Karaites wouldn't let you have Shabbos candles. And similarly, that may be another reason why they specifically chose this parak to say every week, which are the laws of Shabbos candles, as sort of a statement, because that became a symbolic disagreement between, our tradition and the Karaites. So that's that, and I think many argue that is really the real original reason of why we say B'meh Balikim. Okay. Any questions? Any thoughts? Okay, we are going to skip a page, at least in mine. I'm on the bottom of page 180. And will be the paragraph that begins in Ma'ariv the Chazan. Now, what is this going to be about? So we have Kabbalah Shabbos, which is, excuse me, there's one other thing I wanted to see. I must have skipped over it somewhere, but somewhere Rabbi Wohlgemuth points out that for Kabbalah Shabbos, the Chazan traditionally stands in the middle of the shul, not in the front where the Chazan normally is, right? Everyone familiar, right? So the reason for that is that since Kabbalah Shabbos is this sort of later addition, it's not part of sort of the obligatory prayer of Mariv. So to make that distinction, the Chazan stands in a different place. Okay, that's just another point. So we have Kabbalah Shabbos, Tehillim, L'Chadodi, then we have Baruch Hu, and we have a regular Mariv. With a Shabbos Shemona Esrei, but a regular Mariv. And then after Shemona Esrei, we say a few things. We say Vayachulu. Why do we say Vayachulu? We say Vayachulu because the Gemara says that every Friday night is supposed to say Vayachulu. Right, sort of like the psukim from Bereshis that Hashem finished creating the world, and even though we say it in Shemona Esrei, but we repeat it again for two reasons. One, when it's Yontiv Friday night, it's not in our Yontiv Shabbos Shemona Esrei, and two, for people who don't know how to say Shemona Esrei themselves, so we say it out loud and they can listen. Okay. And then we have the Magen Avos Tefillah. What is that? What is that? So we'll read what, okay, very good, very good. And Louise mentioned another thing right before Shmona Esrei, we say V'shamru. We don't have time to discuss all this, but at Maimonides, they don't say that because of salvation didn't say it, because of Vilna Gaon didn't say it, but okay. Louise, we have to leave some things over so there'll be reason for us to keep learning after Shavuos, but that's an excellent point. Okay, what is Magen Avos? So let's read Rabbi Wohlgemuth. In Mariv, the Chazan does not usually repeat the Shemona Esrei, right? We have no Chazan's repetition at a regular Mariv, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday night. Why? Because Mariv was optional. We're not as strict about Mariv originally. Nevertheless, we have an abbreviated repetition on Friday evening called Bracha Achas Me'ein Sheva. Okay, let's look inside. Right, what we sing after Shemona Esrei, right, it's really an abbreviated version of the Shabbos Shemona Esrei. It begins Baruch Atah Hashem, Elokei Avraham, Elokei Yitzchak, etc. Hakel Hagdol Hivarvana Ra, right? That's an abbreviated opening bracha. Magen Avos Bidvaro, that's Baruch Atah Hashem, Magen Avraham. Mechayim Eisim B'Mamaro, that's an allusion to the second bracha of Shemona Esrei, Mechayim Eisim. Hakel Kadosh is an allusion to the third bracha. And then you have sort of a little paragraph about Shabbos, which is like the middle section of Shabbos Shemona Esrei. And then you have the conclusion, Baruch Atah Hashem Mekadesh HaShabbos. So it's almost like an abridged Shemona Esrei and an abridged Chazan's repetition. That's what this is. Now, why do we have an abridged Chazan's repetition Friday night? So here also there are different reasons, different possibilities. Rabbi Wohlgemuth writes, it is not actually a repetition, or that's not its purpose. It was introduced for one purpose only, to make sure that all the worshipers, including the latecomers, get home safely. The shul used to be outside the city and people were afraid to walk home alone. And this addition enabled latecomers to catch up and leave with everyone else. So that Chazal wanted to sort of extend the davening, make it a little bit longer, to make sure everyone had time to get there and daven and catch up and then walk back into the city. And so that's why they enacted it. Now that might be a reason, but what they enacted was they said, okay, so we'll make a Chazan's repetition like we have at other tefillos. We'll make it abridged because it's Friday night, but they made kind of an abridged repetition. Other sources say it's because there used to be people who would eat Friday night dinner in the shul right after Friday night davening. And that's why the custom was in most places to say Kiddush. But I believe the Talmud Yerushalmi says sometimes there wouldn't be any wine, or there wouldn't be any wine in the shul. And so they enacted this bracha that concludes Baruch Atah Hashem Mekadesh HaShabbos, like Kiddush, to be like a stand-in for Kiddush for everyone who's eating at shul when they wouldn't have wine. So that's another reason. But whatever the reason is, it's basically like an abridged Chazan's repetition. Okay.
I just put in the chat that you always see them saying, and for the people who come late, the latecomers, they never say for the people who have trouble getting through the davening so fast.
Yeah, that's a very, I hear Louise. That's a very fair point. Interesting point.
Rabbi,
and then yes, Mark, please, yes.
Talk about these abridged versions. So how free are we to do the abridged Shemona Esrei, which I don't even know how to find, but I see it referenced every once in a while. Why can't I just take the shortcuts, especially if I'm late? Like that?
Very good. So what Mark is referring to during the regular week, on a regular day, Chazal made an abridged Shemona Esrei, in case, you just don't have time, and or Chazal's case is you're working, you work in the field of someone's, orchard, you're not allowed to take off at so much time. So they made an abridged Shemona Esrei. This abridged version is specific though to a minyan and a chazan, right? The Magen Avos, right? If you're davening by yourself alone, you don't say it, because it's specifically to serve as an abridged chazan's repetition. So this one you wouldn't say during the week. In theory, if you really don't have time, you can say the abridged version. You have to look it up. I don't know if most sitters have it. I could find it for you in the Shulchan Aruch, but I don't know it offhand. It's the exact version. But the truth is, I'm not sure on Shabbos if you're ever allowed to say there an abridged. If there's an abridged Shemona Esrei for Shabbos, I seem to recall that there isn't. Shabbos Shemona Esrei is already not so long, so I'm not sure if there's an abridged version for Shabbos.
Renat Yisrael Siddur does have the abridged Shemona Esrei weekday.
The weekday,
Shemona Esrei.
okay, yeah, so that definitely exists.
Soldiers.
Soldiers.
Birnbaum also has it for weekday.
Okay, good. Yeah. So soldiers is definitely another good example. Maybe there's some doctor that's like on, in the hospital, that doesn't really have a break from, 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. So yeah, there are times where that's what a person should do. Yep. Okay, I'm going to pause here. We're going to take a little bit of a break after Shavuos. I know there are some people that very much would like to continue learning about davening using Rabbi Wohlgemuth's book. I know there may be others who would like to learn something else. And there may be some who, want to take a break and want to, take up something else Thursday at 2 p.m., which is certainly fine as well. If you do have a strong opinion of what you would like to do, either, we're going to take a few weeks off no matter what. But if you have a strong opinion that you would like to continue Rabbi Wohlgemuth and or Tefillah, or if you have a strong opinion that you'd like to learn something else, really please email me so I know, and we'll try to figure out what's best for everyone. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. Yasher Koach. I'm not sure how long we've been doing this for, 2 or 3 months. Does that sound right? But I've certainly learned a lot. It's been a good motivation for me to look at the siddur, and the more we understand the siddur, the better we daven, and the more meaningful the davening is for us. So I thank you, and it's been a good opportunity to see people and stay connected as well. I hope everyone enjoyed and got something out of the class and discussions as well. But thank you very much, everyone. So, to be continued. Everyone should have a good Shabbos and a good Yontif.
Thank you.
And see how they're different.